Hello, physical scientist, Ms. Getz here, and today we're going to be talking all about light. We're going to be going over the different types of electromagnetic radiation and a little bit about each of them. And as we go, you're going to want to take notes on your note sheet that you have in Notability. So hopefully you already have answered a little bit of the second question, what are the different types of electromagnetic radiation used for, from watching that awesome video with that very catchy song, The Electromagnetic Spectrum. I know, I'll stop singing for you. But it's really great in both knowing the order of the electromagnetic spectrum and in remembering what some of the uses are for the different parts of the electromagnetic spectrum. So hopefully you have some of those already written down. So electromagnetic radiation, which is what we think of as light in everyday language, is a wave that oscillates in the electric and magnetic fields. And so that means that it can actually travel through empty space because it's just an oscillation in this electric and magnetic field that sort of permeates the universe. We don't really we do sort of fully understand it, but it's this field, and so that means that light can travel through empty space. And it travels at the speed of light, or 300 million meters per second. That's very fast, about 700 million miles per hour. Quite fast indeed. And all parts of the electromagnetic spectrum are used by astronomers, as you learned from Mr. Garver this week. And all parts of the electromagnetic spectrum are also used by humans in different things that we do in our everyday life. Some of them are more common, some of them are less common. So as you learned, our electromagnetic spectrum includes a whole range of radiation, ranging all the way from the really long radio waves. You can see that they have a really long wavelength here, all the way down to these short gamma rays that have a really small wavelength. And that visible light, that part that we usually think of as light, is the small, tiny little part of the spectrum right here that we can see with our eyeballs. So astronomers use different types of light to look at different objects and notice different things from them. This is all one nebula called the Crab Nebula, and we see really different things in different types of electromagnetic radiation when we take a picture with that type of light. So we're going to go through each different type of light, starting out with radio waves. And so you saw this really sweet radio wave image of a black hole from Mr. Carver. Well, I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of its uses. You already heard radio, like a car radio or a TV antenna. And the wavelength of radio waves is very long, the longest actually. So it ranges from 600 meters to 10 centimeters. It's about the same length as a football field. You'll want to jot that down on your note sheet. Its energy level is super duper low, and it's not at all dangerous. So just a reminder, you might be saying, oh, great, Ms. Getz, but what am I supposed to do again? Well, you should be filling out this section right here where you're writing down our wavelength, you're writing down the energy level and whether or not it's dangerous for each of the different types of electromagnetic radiation that I'm going to go over. So right now you should have radio waves done, and if you don't, pause video right now so that you can jot down this information about radio waves. So then we have microwaves. And you saw this cosmic microwave background, very cool, like a baby picture of the universe. And microwaves are a smaller wavelength than radio waves, and it's about 10 centimeters to 1 millimeter. That means it's like the size of your hand down to like a millimeter, which is like, I don't know, the thickness of a piece of paper. So they have a medium-sized wavelength, and their energy level is pretty low, and they're not at all dangerous. But when you're using a microwave, you should use it appropriately and don't put metals in it. It's just not a good idea. But that's the device, the microwave, rather than microwaves in general. A fun use for microwaves that you didn't hear in Emerson Foo's excellent song is that they are actually the way that you're listening to me right now, probably with wireless internet, and also the way that you send texts or make phone calls on your mobile phone. So those are also used through microwaves. We have infrared radiation. Look at this beautiful picture. Oh, such a lovely nebula. So infrared radiation, 1 millimeter down to 750 nanometers. It's about the size on the big scale of the pinpoint of a needle. It's like that tiny little point. It's a pretty low energy level, and it's not really dangerous. You saw these uses in Emerson Foo's excellent video again. Oh, you can't see this person's mask. Infrared radiation is something that now in COVID times, we are considering using infrared radiation, or scientists use it to sort of track people as they come in to monitor whether or not they have a fever. There's varying studies of whether that's effective or not, but it's just kind of a fun use for infrared radiation. Again, anytime you need to pause the video to write down your information, go ahead and do so. Then we have visible light. Beautiful picture of the Whirlpool galaxy. So pretty. So visible light is the light you're probably very familiar with, and that has a very small wavelength, again, 750 to 400 nanometers, about the size of a bacteria or a virus. And it has a pretty darn low energy level. Not as low as some of the others, but still pretty low. And it is not at all dangerous. You're familiar with probably lots of different uses for visible light, like plants use visible light actually to produce oxygen and glucose. Om nom nom, delicious plants. You know that hot things here on Earth, when you look at hot things, you notice that they glow. That's why stars glow as well in visible light, because they're so darn hot. But you might be wondering, like, why is it that I can only see visible light as a human? You know, I hear you. Why do I have this limitation? And so the way that the human eyeball works, it actually has a lens in it. That's this little thing here, and it's a little sack of fluid. And your eye can change its focus to different distances, and its little muscles here changing the size of this lens. Isn't that cool? Anyway, going on, Ms. Getz. The reason that we see the specific colors that we do is that our eyeball has these specific cells in it. So there's lots of rod cells. Those are these gray colored cells here. And rod cells are really great at detecting light differences. So whether it's bright or faint or a change in motion, you have a lot of them. But rod cells don't detect color at all. To detect color, we have these specific different cells called cone cells, and they detect specific colors. In fact, red, green, and blue are the specific colors that they can detect. And so your eyeball can actually only see those three colors, but from how much of those three different colors you're getting, your brain can create any of the many colors of the rainbow. Or potentially, if you might be missing one of these cells, like you might be missing the red rod cells, people who are colorblind are often missing one or two of the types of cone cells. That makes you colorblind, and that's because you're missing that cell that would allow you to see that color. It means that you also can't see some of the other related colors. So we only see visible light, and again, we can only see or only detect red, green, and blue light, but the little detectors in your eyeball are not super precise. So if the detector for green light and red light goes off at the same time in your eyeball, those cone cells, they go off and say, I'm seeing red and green light. It sends this little signal through the optical nerve to your brain. Your brain is like, hey, light. You actually detect that. Your brain translates that into yellow. And so actually your iPad only can produce red, blue, and green light. And then your eyeball and your brain combine those together to all these different colors that you're seeing on the screen right now. Crazy, right? Other animals see different ranges of light than we do. Other creatures here on Earth. Dogs only have green and blue cone cells. Bees can see ultraviolet light, so they see different patterns on flowers than we can with our visible light eyeballs. So that's just some pretty cool things about how we as humans see light and can perceive visible light. So then moving on, we've got ultraviolet light, and this is a really sweet picture of the sun in ultraviolet. It's from SDO, which is actually a spacecraft I did research with when I was in college. So ultraviolet light is a pretty small wavelength, 400 nanometers to 10 nanometers. It's about the same size as like molecules of stuff. Molecules of sugar, molecules of water, about that same size. And it has a medium energy level. And so that actually means that it can be dangerous. So tanning beds, they actually damage your skin cells. That's what gives you a tan. Sunburn, which is caused by ultraviolet light from the sun, is damaged skin cells. And again, you maybe heard in Emerson Fu's excellent song that we use it to sanitize. And that's because it can kill cells. So it can be dangerous. And you might say, Ms. Getz, why would this type of light be dangerous, but like the other types of light aren't? And it actually has to do with their energy level and their wavelength. So different wavelengths of light interact with different things, kind of based on like the size of the light or how much energy the light has to cause a thing to shake, to get some energy, to get some kinetic energy actually. So here we have a little gamma, we'll talk about that later, coming in, and it's actually causing this electron to go off of this atom, causing the electron to break away from this atom as it's coming in, and that's based on its wavelength and its energy. And so in the electromagnetic spectrum, we think about whether something is dangerous or not based on whether or not it can break apart the electrons from an atom, or break apart the bonds in an atom, or break apart the nucleus of an atom. Because you know what? You're made of atoms. And if the ways that your atoms are arranged into different molecules inside of your cells changes, that can be really bad for you. So our dangerous types are, we call them ionizing, because this process of breaking apart the electron from the atom is called ionizing. And it's ultraviolet, X-ray, and gamma rays are all ionizing. So they can damage your cells by damaging your DNA. They can damage other functions in your cells. And that's because they can split the bonds in the atom apart. The visible light and infrared light don't really do that. They do excite electrons, but they don't take them away from the atom. And microwave and radio waves just induce a little bit of current, a little bit of electric current, a little bit of motion in them, but not enough to be dangerous, not enough to, again, break apart the bonds of molecules or atoms themselves. So that's what makes ultraviolet light a little bit dangerous. Then we have X-ray light, and again, here's a super great view of this crab nebula in the X-ray. And X-rays are really small wavelengths, so 10 nanometers, all the way down to 10 to the minus 12 meters, which is very small. Nanometers is 10 to the minus 9. Anyway, very, very, very small. It's about the same size as an atom. The wavelength of an X-ray, about the same size as an atom. That means that they have a really high energy level, and they're very, very dangerous. That's why when you go to the doctor to get an X-ray to show broken bones, like this person has 2 broken bones, you have like lead put on the part of you that they're not looking at, because they want to prevent the parts of your body that don't need to get exposed to X-rays from getting them. And you also only get X-rays every so often. Like when you go to the dentist, they only give you an X-ray every so often so that you don't get a lot of exposure. If you get only a little exposure, not so bad. Lots, really bad. Then we have gamma rays, and gamma rays are the most energetic type of light. So this is a gamma ray burst and a pulsar. Super cool. And so gamma rays are the tiniest of wavelengths, 10 to the minus 12 meters and smaller. So I actually wrote that out here. So 10 to the minus 12 means this many zeros in front of a 1. It's about the same size as a nucleus of an atom. And so they're very, 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 very tiny. And that means that they can interact with very, 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 very tiny things like atoms and break them apart, which is what makes them very dangerous. They have a high energy level, and they really easily kill our cells by damaging these bonds between the atoms inside of our cells, and even damaging the atoms themselves, changing them. And so that's why that they're used with very great caution. And one use for them is something called a cancer knife, or a gamma ray knife, where you target lots of gamma rays in a really precise way at something like a tumor inside of someone's body. So it will damage some of the cells that it goes through to get there, but if you concentrate all of the different beams of gamma rays, that's how the gamma ray knife works. So we have learned about the electromagnetic spectrum. Hopefully you've completed your note sheet, and you should go play the song again.
Violet X-rays, gamma rays, radio waves, microwaves, infrared radiation.
Good luck, folks.
X-rays.